Welcome to Make Your Own Miniatures Mindfully, a panel at Save Against Fear 2020. I've been wanting to come to Save Against Fear for years. Their director Jack has been on me for years to go. I was hoping to finally go this year. They're in York, Pennsylvania. It did not work out, so we're doing this virtually. But I'm glad to finally do a panel, and I'm excited because I get to do it with two friends. So welcome to our panel. And yeah, this is being recorded over Zoom visually. So if you're listening to the podcast version of this, be on the lookout. There may be, if we can figure it out, there may be a video version of this that you can follow along. So let me introduce myself real quick in case you don't know me. My name is Josué Cardona. I'm an engineer. So I actually have an engineering technology degree. I'm a tinker. I'm like, this is my thing. I'm also currently a design and diversity and inclusion design researcher at the University of Chicago. I have a master's in mental health counseling. I'm the founder of Geek Therapy and the Let's Play Therapy Institute. That is a picture of me with my favorite version of Batman, which I will get to back to in a second. So I just a big part of the reason why we're even doing this right now is because about 2 years ago on an episode of GT Radio, we and Brandon was on the show at the time. He was one of my co-hosts. We did an episode around spider sonas right around the time that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse came out. And there was this hashtag going around, hashtag Spider-Sona, and people were making their versions of Spider-Man. Like, if they were Spider-Man, what would they be? So all of us on the team, we made different versions. I remember Brandon made a, what was it called? Spider Shrink was yours?
I think that was it. I was just trying to remember the name of it.
It was Spider Shrink. It was very cool. And the version that I ended up making was a version of the original Gundam from Mobile Suit Gundam from 1979, the RX-78-2, and digitally on the computer, I mocked it up and made it into the RX Spider-Man. So I painted it in Spider-Man colors. I added the webs. I added Spider-Man eyes because I love Gundam. Actually, whenever I play, usually when I play, like the first time I tried playing D&D with you, Brandon. My username, my character name was Amuro, and Amuro is the main character of Mobile Suit Gundam. And I usually my characters are online or Amuro something. I made an Amara recently in Elder Scrolls Online. So I love Gundam. And for years, I've been wanting to build kits and stuff, but never really had the space. So now since the coronavirus, I finally went all the way in, and I was like, you know what? I want to start building. And so I've come a long way. Like you can see a picture of my desk area. Like my backlog of kits is all the boxes up top. I've got my work area with a whole bunch of paint and tools and a painting booth, and I've made a few different Gundams of all sizes. I've even started building other types. Like I have an Escaflowne waiting for me, some DBZ ones, and I've got a picture of Optimus Prime here, who looks kind of like the RX Spider-Man, but still. So I actually have multiple versions of the RX-78-2 Gundam robot model kit because I'm hoping to practice with them and eventually make that RX Spider-Man that I designed. So that's my idea. And then I wanted to talk, in geek therapy fashion about these hobbies and what they mean to me and what they mean to other people and how they're helpful to me and how they're helpful to other people. So this panel is a chance for me and Brandon to talk about this stuff. And it's also a chance for me to coerce Joe into starting a new podcast with me where this is the type of thing that we talk about. There's also very much an audition for Joe. So if you see the picture that I showed before of me with my favorite version of my favorite bat suit, which is the Azrael Batman suit, the person in that suit is actually Dr. Joe Serrano, who is here with us, and he actually made that suit. That was at C2E2. I don't even remember what year that was. That was a while back. That must have been 2015 or 16. I'm not sure. One of those. It was a while back. So Joe, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Joe Serrano. My doctorate is in clinical psychology, so that's my formal degree. Right now, I am the clinic and business development manager over at the TheraPlay Institute, which is actually a pretty cool place in the sense that it's a modality, it's a specific type of play therapy modality that's really geared towards helping families, children with attachment disorders, helping out with adoption, fostering, just kids who are having a really hard time connecting with their caregivers, amongst other, challenges. I'm also a clinician over at a private practice where, I provide more therapy and clinical services that way. But the nice thing about this is, at heart, I am a geek. I'm a nerd. I grew up on comic books, and I love comic books. As you can see in my picture, there's various masks, and a lot of them are from just geeky things over the years. I was born in the 1980s, and I grew up on some really old school cartoons that are very, very near and dear to my heart. Like, as you can see there, that's the classic 1980s Shredder up in the corner. There's some 1980s Transformers, things of that nature. So that was really inspiring for me. And then I found a bunch of other like-minded clinicians in the field who loved geek culture. I really connected with them, and I've had the privilege of presenting with them and meeting just awesome colleagues all over the field. So I specifically focus in on the connection between comic books and psychology, and we've kind of termed that psychocomicology, where it's the connection of all comic book things related to psychology and the use of the use of comic books in terms of psychological well-being. So there's that. But outside of that, which is actually why I'm here, is I'm an artist. In my non-psychological life, I am an artist, and I have my art, whatever you want to call it, my art in my platform is called Spicy Panda Creations, and I've done I've just done everything in regards to art. I've been artistic my whole life. And Josué, if you would go to the next slide, I'll show you some of these things. Primarily, I'm known for doing. I was originally known for doing paintings, and as you can see, I can do realistic. I do a lot of quirky things. I've started recently messing with a lot of watercolors, and ironically enough, people love their animals and their pets, so people have wanted a lot of pet watercolor pictures. So I was like, all right. So that's one of the things that I'm known for. Josué, if you could move to the next one. Then I actually got into sculpture building, so I'm not necessarily someone who, I don't know how to 3D print. I actually build a lot of things from scratch and miscellaneous things. So that's kind of applied to all these different aspects of my life, and I try to incorporate them in different aspects of my life. So for my wedding, it was comic book themed, and each wedding table was a comic book building or world of some sort, and the building you're looking to on the right side is my interpretation of Asgard. And I have these little figurines of Thor and Hulk and Ronan the Accuser, and just cranked out all these little platforms and put them on each of the tables. So it would be like, oh, you're over at Stark Tower, I'm sitting over at the X-Men Mansion, and apparently you're over at Asgard. So that was kind of cool. But I also create little figures, and you can't tell, but I had a request, but a friend asked me to create these Hello Kitty figurines in X-Men themed fashion. So those figurines, if you see in the background, those are the 6-inch Marvel Legend figures. So these Hello Kitty figures are about 3 inches at best, and they're a blank figure. And I used a lot of time and patience and putty. I had to get some dental tools to sculpt on these things. I had a magnifying glass right in front of my face. I felt like a jeweler, and I was just going to town with these Hello Kitty figurines. So yeah, I create sculptures. So, but the last thing I'm actually known for is cosplay. And I create suits that people can fit inside, and we go to these conventions. And as was said before, I created that Azrael suit, and that was kind of that was something that I really, really, really wanted to wear for the longest. But over the years, I've created multiple suits for myself, for my friends, for my wife. The most recent one was the traditional version of Azrael in his red and gold. But prior to that, I'm in the Wolverine suit next to the female Cyclops, which is my wife. And I built the Guyver suit that a friend had assisted me with, and it's just been a great journey, and the cosplays just keep getting bigger and better and more intense. So we'll see what happens from there.
Okay, yeah. Let's see how that goes. Yeah, man, this is these pictures.
So cool.
So freaking cool. So cool. Yeah. Okay. All right, Brandon, you're up.
That's a hard act to follow in some ways. The cosplay and the sculpts are so, I mean, all of it was so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I'm Brandon Saxton. I have my PhD in psychological clinical science, or clinical psychological science. You can reorder those, I suppose. And I currently work at a nonprofit community mental health center. And I have gotten involved with the Geek Therapy community. Gosh, what was it? 4 years ago? More than that, maybe?
I don't know, but we're old.
Probably longer than that, actually. So yeah, I originally was on a podcast called Jedi Council. Even though Jedi is in the name, it did not focus or feature very much Star Wars content, which I was often reminded of. And so I did that podcast for a few years. There was a small spin-off podcast that never really took off very much. And then I was involved with the Geek Therapy Radio podcast as well for one perfect full year, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you were a co-host. Yeah.
Yep, which was a lot of fun. And then I've also done some other things with the Geek Therapy community. Is like I was on the Twitch channel for a while. Currently, I'm it's not been as productive lately as I would like it to be, thanks 2020, but also trying to run the Geek Therapy Adventures podcast, which is like an actual play D&D podcast, which is a lot of fun. And so for me, kind of my three sort of intersections, and I was reflecting on this, and I guess maybe I put my slides in the wrong order in some ways.
I can reorder them for you. And by the way, I added the Geek Therapy Adventures,
which I loved. That was a great touch.
But it's also it was a selfish thing to do because I created the cover and I'm so proud of it.
It's really cool.
Yeah. And Joe, that watercolor, it's all digital stuff. Like but I didn't actually paint it. It's like assets and stuff that I put together. But I'm very proud of it regardless. That's it.
I've absolutely.
I was like, Joe's putting his watercolors up. I'm putting mine.
Absolutely no. I want to get a framed copy for to hang on the wall because it is that cool.
I mean, we kind of I kept getting input and stuff from you guys, and it was so great. All right, which slide do you want next?
Let's jump to the tabletop RPG slide.
Let's do that. Okay.
So yeah. This is kind of where, like with the Geek Therapy Adventures, this is one of my big hobbies and probably one of this kind of sets the stage, I think, for why I was pulled in or invited to, I should say, to be on this panel.
Yes.
I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons now for years, and I think I say this probably regularly. It's my favorite hobby. And it's just, if folks haven't had the opportunity to play, it really is a lot of fun. And actually a couple of things here. That picture on the top right is actually from the Dark Souls board game. But anything involving miniatures, I had to throw up here. It's had some good stuff. And I just think it's such a fantastic hobby because it involves regular social kind of communication. There's a lot of you get to, do the role playing aspect. You get to get comfortable doing improvisation or putting perspective taking. There's just a lot that goes into playing in Dungeons and Dragons, because there's a lot of social skills involved in that process. And so I think it's a good, from a psychological mental health standpoint, there's a lot of benefits in my very kind of biased probably opinion about Dungeons and Dragons. So I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for a long time, but the problem with Dungeons and Dragons, which is reflected I think really well in the podcast, is sometimes scheduling is hard. And then you let kind of like, how do I do Dungeons and Dragons when I can't play Dungeons and Dragons? And so that's where I got into the miniatures in a really big way. And so I started really trying to do some painting with the miniatures, which is a lot of fun. Again, I think it's a really great hobby. It's one where you get to practice a lot of mindfulness, a lot of acceptance, especially if you're like me and you're prone to like some perfectionistic thinking, especially when you're new. It's really hard to get those exactly how you want them to be. And there's a lot of details and a lot of opportunities to really practice being in the moment and participating in an activity. So it's a really fun hobby. I was just sharing on Thursday with Josué that I have a box of probably 70 or more unpainted miniatures. So I accumulate them much, much faster than I paint them. And as I kind of got involved with the miniatures, they're really fun to pick up, but I really wanted to get into making my own, which brings me to the third sort of hobby, which is the 3D printing part. Now, none of this stuff, and I included stuff here that's not miniatures, but none of this stuff is stuff that I designed on my own, but it is all kind of reflected like stuff that people have made and things that I've really gotten into kind of trying to create on my own printer. So I don't have a very high end or very fancy printer at all. Mine's pretty entry level. So a part of 3D printing, I think for me, a big part of it was I kind of thought you just kind of punched it in and it happened. There's a lot more art, I think, to the science of 3D printing than I certainly appreciated or recognized. And so that's been a lot of fun, is to really get into the tinkering a little bit and get into the technical side of 3D printing and really fine tune my printer so it can make reasonable miniatures, like that one in the top middle there with that terrain piece with the walls there. That miniature's, I would say, for my kind of quality of printer, that's a pretty good one. And then I had to throw in the Batman bust and the Baby Yoda, of course. And I really like that picture on the left too, because it was me trying to print the same miniature 5 times. Yeah. And so you can see it's not just a kind of a one and done where you just punch it in and go. You really have to be patient and mindful. And even that miniature, these things take quite a while to print because they're printing, a 0.1, millimeter at a time. So it takes a while. And so that one was pretty cool there too. I actually ended up keeping the one that's second from the right there, where it kind of turned into a spiral, because I thought that might be cool in a tabletop game, that there's maybe some kind of spell effect, or this is a boss like teleporting in, or a different form or something like that. But it was actually just filament that didn't stick at all. So it was just dropping it into air.
Have you watched Onward, Disney's Onward?
I have. That's exactly why I kept it, is just to do things kind of like that, right?
For those of you that don't know, like in Onward, they do this spell and they try to bring their father back for... He died, but they try to, like, there's a spell that can bring him back for a day, but they mess it up halfway through, so they only bring back the legs. So for most of the movie, it's just his legs walking around. Looks just like you're like a 3D print. That's
exactly. So, and I guess at the end here, what's kind of cool is now I've gotten a bit here. Now, of course, coronavirus has put a real hamper on this because I'm not doing any face-to-face D&D anymore, but it's fun to combine all of these hobbies now into one. And so that was sort of where I started with Dungeons and Dragons. It was like, how can I enjoy this hobby when I'm not able to play? And through the development of terrain or set pieces and printing and painting miniatures, and there's some really cool communities that do this stuff, printing and painting of miniatures. That's been a really cool way for me to really engage with that hobby, even when I'm not able to play regularly. And it's just really been a lot of fun. And yeah, so I think that's kind of where I got in, and I really, this is one hobby that's really nice for my own mental health. And I think so much of the work that I do as a clinician is abstract in nature in some ways, like wellness or health. So it's nice to have hobbies that are tangible, because I can make something and then look at it, and then that feels good, because I don't always get that in other parts of my life. So I think it's a really nice hobby for me, and I would really encourage other people to check it out as well.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, Joe, you can speak on your 3D printer situation. I know how to 3D, like how to model in 3D. I used to teach kids how to do this. I learned to do it myself, but I've never owned a 3D printer. I've used multiple 3D printers. So I always want one. And now I want one more than ever because I'm just like building plastic stuff all the time. And it's like, oh, I can just make my own pieces. Like the other day I was like, man, I really want, like all the Gundam figures, they use these beam sabers, they call them, but they're lightsabers. And I've been like looking up where to buy them. I'm like, man, but I can, like, that's really simple. I could probably like there are ways around this, right? There's so many things that you can do with a 3D printer, and I really really want one. And I'll say, you also said you have like 70 miniatures that have not been painted.
Yeah,
I mean, with a 3D printer, you have like infinite number, right?
That's true.
But when you said that number, it was so funny because like that's how many model kits I have like in my backlog right now, and I wish mine were this small. Like they're all like big boxes. There's a closet over here. Like I mean, you can kind of see part of my backlog up here, but that's just, there's more in the closet.
Well, you can imagine how much more difficult it is when you're like, there's only so much room you can store these gigantic 7-foot suits. You know, we have no room whatsoever in the apartment to hold all of the creations and all the suits that people have. And one of the stipulations I have is that, you know, if I make your suit, it's yours and you're holding it somewhere, whether it's in your closet or you get a storage center for it, because I don't have any more room to hold any of this stuff.
That's so funny. We're working at different scales.
Yeah, it's true. That is actually very true.
Yep, that is so funny.
Yeah. Joe, any reflections on anything else that Brandon was saying? I mean, you guys are just meeting right now for the first time.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the 3D printing aspect, and this to me is just amazing in itself, because I've always been just intimidated by 3D printing. I actually received a gift of a 3D printer last Christmas, and it's still in its box just because I'm like,
it's October, Joe.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's almost been 1 year, and it keeps saying, you know, if I don't open it, it's not there, and therefore I don't have to learn it. Gosh, you know, I just think about, like, you know, how much as was being said by Brandon, how much of an art this is, and I don't know if my brain is wired that way. I'm more of a, you know, I like building things by hand and you know, getting in the trenches, so to speak. But you know, this is a whole nother world for me that I have no idea what any of this is, and therefore it's just kind of intimidating and scary at this point in time. But the work is beautiful. It's absolutely stunning.
Yeah, there's a thing about the resolution that a 3D printer can do. So the more expensive it is, the higher the resolution. Mm-hmm. And since I got into the Gundam, primarily the Gundam model kit building, I thought you just put it together and then you have your own action figure or robot or statue, and that's it. But the more you get into it, it's like, oh, wait a minute. I can actually make those seam lines disappear, and I can make it look cooler, and I can make it look not like a model that I put together. I can make this thing look like a real robot. We were talking, me and Brandon were talking about dioramas the other day, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh no, like we can blow this up, right? Like it's not just the plastic kit that came in the box. There's so many tools and things. So that has changed my mindset a lot about the 3D printing, because now I feel like I can do a 3D print and the resolution doesn't bother me anymore, because mm-hmm. now I can sand that thing, I can prime it, and I can make it, you know, I can even add detail or do other things, right? Like I can put together multiple pieces and make it look like they're just one piece. And I have the skills now to do that, which I didn't have, you know, years before, when I was like, I don't know, like how am I going to glue these two pieces of plastic together and make it look cool? And it's not that hard, but it's definitely a part of it. It's like, that's where my skills are at now. And there's so much more to learn and do, but 3D printing just opens it up ridiculously. It's like, oh, it's so oh man, it's so cool. Also, I always love to, I mean, I love that Batman on the right. How large is that one?
Well, that was it printed in two parts, so there's a base that sits under it. Oh. And I would say it probably, I'm looking over at it right now. it probably sits up almost nearly a foot, 10 inches maybe.
Wow.
So it's pretty big. Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
it's pretty large. And that one, it was printed at the lowest resolution, of course, because it probably took between 2 and 3 days probably to print. So
would have taken a week if you would have done it.
Yeah, for sure. And the longer the print time, the higher the risk of something going off. And like kind of you see with those 5 miniatures there, the longer it goes, the more chance that something could go wrong for sure.
Yeah. And again, before we start on kind of like the substance of the panel itself, I have to point out for the people who don't know you, Brandon, that to me you're the ultimate cosplayer because because you have a bat symbol tattooed on your chest that's like as big as your Batman bust.
That is true.
Yes, you get naked and you're cosplaying as Batman.
It's right. You can maybe see it peeking there a little if you're watching the video. Yeah, I should have put on one of my V-neck shirts for the panel here. I didn't. It's funny. I had got this tattoo over 10 years ago, and I do forget that I have it sometimes. And then there are times I'm like, holy shit, there's a huge Batman logo on my chest. Never a regret about it, of course, but every once in a while, sort of just a reminder that did happen.
Wow, that is, I am that much more in awe of that. I do not have the stones to get something like that done, but Brandon, that is amazing.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it again. I will say that because it was not because I regret that it's there. I'm happy I got it, but it was uncomfortable on the sternum. Getting a tattoo right on your sternum is very painful. I will say that from recollection.
Oh, I love it. All right, so let's get into the meat of the panel. I've got a few questions here. We can jump around, and so I'm just very curious, and I'll start with you, Joe. Like, how do you use these hobbies in your clinical work?
So it really does depend on, for me, it really does depend on what presenting problems are. But when clients or patients come in, it really helps in the sense of, I think art in general is something that helps people focus and express themselves in very different ways. So for my clinical work, it kind of plays on this idea that these cosplays and these characters and these sculptures, they're representations of what people sometimes wish they could be or what they aspire to. And, that's one of the beauties about cosplay is that not only can you like Batman, you can have the values of Batman, but you can actually become Batman for essentially a few hours. And, it's kind of one of those, in the world of like, what would you do? You're like, well, what would Batman do? And I'm actually Batman. So I kind of get to take a break from all the stuff that's going on in my life, whether it's depression or anxiety or trauma or whatever. And I get to take, a brief hiatus and have some freedom just for a little bit of time to really explore what it would be like. And those are really great goals for clients and patients to get to. So you say, well, if, somebody's struggling with something like, I don't know, somebody's struggling with social anxiety, and you're like, well, who's a character that you like that has no social anxiety? Like, what would that be like? And let's say hypothetically, somebody identifies with Deadpool and like is saying like, oh, I love Deadpool because Deadpool doesn't care and Deadpool will say what he wants and do what he wants, but I could never do that. And I'm like, well, what if you could be Deadpool for an hour of your life? What would you do with that time? You're not you're taking a minute, you're taking that hour, you're working towards this thing, and you're Deadpool for that hour. What would you do? So, we kind of talk about that, but then it's like, well, what would empower you to kind of take on those values? And, as they say, dress for the job you want, so to speak. So like, what better attire than donning the suit? So I'm like, here you go. Let's create the Batman costume. Let's create the Daredevil costume. Let's do those things. And they get a taste of what it would be like to like not have some of these challenges. And I'm like, well, how was that for you? Now, how do we connect those two worlds of what's going on in real life and what was happening with this suit that you got to wear? So it's a lot of use of fantasy, which is an amazing thing. But there are other various things, and I'm sure the both of you can kind of touch on these as well. But like, it's just simple things like acceptance, in the sense of, as you both know, there are some things that happen when you're building and creating that you just gotta go with the flow. You're like, hey, this 3D model did not print, but you know what? I'm going to accept that and turn it into something else. And a lot of times in the world of building and cosplay, you're like, this is not going to get fixed, and if I try to mess with it, it's going to ruin the whole project. So I gotta be okay and learn to tolerate these challenges or mistakes, so to speak, that I'm not really keen about, and just be okay with it. Some of the other things about the clinical work side is having connection. So socially, I mean, like, it feeds in that social need, because the world of cosplay can be used for social networking in terms of just like a building community. So many times artists are kind of left to their lonesome in their own devices, and you see you're stuck in your room or your workshop, if you're so lucky to have one, and you're just by yourself. But with the world of cosplay, it's kind of nice when you're like, hey, everybody come over and we're gonna work on our stuff together. And I just have so many fond memories over the years of 20 people in my apartment just in a corner painting or building or asking advice. And those were some of the best moments for me. So yeah, it addresses a lot of those things. It specifically for clinical disorders, I think building like this and getting in there, it really helps with slowing down. So really helps with like ADHD and helping with focus, being present. Sometimes people have a lot of executive functioning challenges where they're having a hard time figuring out like next steps and stages and bigger picture things. And building requires all that stuff. So you're saying like, well, if I do this, how am I going to do that 2 steps ahead? So not only are you being present in what you're doing, but you're also developing an understanding and awareness of like, well, how am I going to get to the next stage? It's kind of like a physical chess game, if you want to consider it that way. And then it addresses tactile needs. So some people really need to feel certain things, and it deals with like proprioceptive needs. So proprioception is having a spatial awareness of your body. So if you're like, well, if I move my hand like this, I'm definitely cutting some fingers off right now. But, I just have to be really aware of how I'm holding this, or where I am in relation to the sander that I'm using, or, where's this Dremel going to be in relation to my face, So there's a lot of wonderful things that we use in terms of clinical work.
Very cool. Very cool. I have more questions, but I want to throw the same question to Brandon. What are you like? How do you use these hobbies that we were talking about in your work?
Yeah, of course. I think there's probably a lot of overlap in everything that Joe is just saying, and a lot of the same ideas, just on a different scale, though, a little bit, right? But yeah, it's very similar in terms of sometimes we get stuck in patterns of behavior and doing things that maybe aren't very helpful for our mental health, or maybe not doing things that could be helpful for our mental health. And so I think these are just opportunities to engage some of those things that we know can be really beneficial, like regular social interaction, or like just engaging in activities that we know are going to boost up our mood. And so when I'm working with clients and we're getting into identifying some of these connections between activity and mood, and how are they spending their time and how are they feeling, if I offer these as things that they could try, almost like a behavioral experiment, right? I can share, and I do just a bit of self-disclosure and maybe share that, for myself. Sometimes when I'm stuck in a low mood cycle, it's really helpful to have a one scheduled social event every week, D&D, right? Or it's really helpful for me to sit down for a couple hours and maybe listen to a podcast and do some painting. What do you think that would do for you? Do you think that, you could get anything out of that? What would be the harm in trying it? And then if we can start to just kind of build those cycles or build those routines of doing some of those things that we know are going to be helpful, that's when we can start to see some change in the mood side of things, if we can change some of the activity. And so I think that's probably where most of the incorporation comes from me. I haven't had, I've never painted a miniature with someone in a session. I think that would be a lot of fun, and I would like to do that. I just haven't had that sort of opportunity. But I would say for me, it's more talking about how can we incorporate these things in those big gaps of time between our sessions to help boost you up in those times. And what activities maybe that I know I'm interested in would you maybe share some interest in as well?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely, right? I mean, if you're familiar at all with like our podcasts and what we've been doing at Geek Therapy for years, it's I talk about it in 3 different forms. It's like we can let our clients geek out and like bring their hobbies into it, and then I talk about like us geeking out, right? So like as the clinician, it's like, hey, like, yeah, I have comic books in my waiting room. I have, all my favorite things are here. Like that's an invitation. That's me putting it out there that I love these things, and we can talk about them. We can do stuff with them. And then sometimes we have the opportunity to both geek out together, right? So if they really like something that I'm presenting, or that I'm talking about, or that I have in my space, they can jump on that and be like, oh, no, yeah, look, I totally get that. Like, oh, you like comic books? It's like, I've been dealing with anxiety. Like, I don't know. And it's like, oh, Spider-Man? Like, let's talk about Spider Sense. It's like, oh, I never saw it that way. So there's so many ways that we can integrate this. And I can tell you that there's something, and I've been thinking a lot about this, about just the act of making something and putting something out into the world, like redirecting your energy into creation, into adding to the world. Like maybe sometimes the world feels like it's taking from you, but this idea that you can add to it by making some sort of piece of art, I don't know, like the biggest thing for me in the way that I'm building and making stuff now versus like I used to teach kids how to like model things and print them, right? That's like one version of that is making something new. But I love the idea of modifying something, right? Like what would you change? If you could change something, what would you do? If you can make a different version of this, what would it be like? What aspect would you like? And then to actually do that, right? Like on paper, it's a lot easier, right, than actually building models. But the concepts are the same. So if I'm talking to someone who's a builder, like if something breaks, you can put that back together, and you could even make it better, and like that we can talk about a figure that broke and then talk about building it back up, talking about trauma and post-traumatic growth and things like that, right? And like I think it'll make a lot of sense if that's something that you're into. So I love how like you see it in those very particular ways. And like Brandon, like you said, like I've never done it in the session, but what it can happen in between sessions, right, is absolutely a big deal. It's like, have you tried? So I might say, have you tried making a modification? Like come back next week and let me know what you changed. What did you do? Oh, I made the shield bigger. Why'd you make the shield bigger? Like, oh, because, he'll be safer that way, or I want his defenses to go up, and I wish I could do that, right? That's a version of that. So yeah, so many possibilities. It's always hard to do stuff in session. That's actually I'm doing another panel tonight, and that's exactly what it's about. It's about the idea that we would love to do these things in session, but that's not really possible most of the time. For most of us, most of the time, that's not going to happen. Especially as you go up in scale, right, Joe?
Yeah. I'm like, when people figure out that I do cosplay and they're like, oh my gosh, can you can you teach me how to do that? Can you show me how to do that? Or like, can we build something? The response I have to give is that, you know, as much as I would love that, there's just no there's the physical room is not enough. You know, most therapy session rooms are, you know, like the standard size of like a bedroom, and you know, in there you have a couch, you have a desk, and you know, like a lot of times you don't have a workshop, you don't have a bench, you don't have any of those things, and at least in the world of cosplay, it's the materials you need are just, you know, excessive. You need like heat guns and sanders.
It's an excessive hobby. Yeah.
It's a pretty big hobby. And I mean, like, as you go further and further in scale, you know, the bigger it is, the bigger the toys, the bigger the machines, you know? So, Josué, you were sharing that, like, when you were making your Gundams, it's not just a little clipper now. It's like, well, I have 15 tools to do X, Y, and Z. And I tell people, yeah, we can use a pair of craft scissors, but if you want it to be at this kind of standard, this quality, we're going to have to up the game. And there's just no feasible way of doing it. And believe me, I've tried. So I recall. Yeah. I recall someone asking, you know, so what I do now with clients is if they want something, or if they want to engage just in that process or give them a flavor of it, we'll build a portion of the suit. We can't build the whole suit. So maybe I'll work with them on creating the emblem, you know? So I remember somebody really wanted to be the Flash, and we talked about what the Flash represented to them. And, you know, the concept of running all the time, and instead of running away from things, can you run towards things? And, you know, so that was very symbolic for this one client. So, you know, I said, out of all the things that you think would be the most difficult to create, what do you think would be the hardest? And maybe that's something I can help you with. And they said, well, I think the symbol would be really difficult. So I was like, well, let's do it. You know, the symbol, you know, it needs to be big enough to just fit on your chest. So, you know, we can create that. But then, you know, I've tried it where someone, and that's fine. I have the means to do that. I can fit most things in a duffel bag. But then when somebody is asking me to, you know, build a 7-foot robot, which I have done, you know, and usually I use like planks or 2x4s to help elevate them under the shoes. And, you know, like it involves drilling, it involved nails and screws. And I remember that one of the things that I did was the screws were way too long and they were coming out of the bottom. So I had to saw those screws off, and I had a Dremel with a saw, and I started doing this in a session room upstairs, and like smoke was coming out of the nails and sparks were flying, and I was like, this is a fire hazard. Like, I don't want to be on the news for this kind of reason. So yeah, we just had to, like, it's just not feasible.
So one question that I have for both of you is how you have used your hobby for your own mental health or well-being. Joe, any ideas? Yeah.
So for me, I am so busy. I am really, really so busy that I forget to take care of myself sometimes. And it's so sad because we should be practicing what we preach, but it's one of these, it starts becoming do as I say and not as I do. But yeah, I'm just so busy in the world of mental health that I just sometimes forget to take really good care of myself. You know, and as an artist, I just need that creative time. I know I do. It helps me center, for lack of a better word. It helps me relax. It helps me stretch the creative muscles. And when I don't do that and I get stuck in the rat race of paperwork and just, you know, helping everyone else's mental health issues, mine just tends to deteriorate. You know, I find myself just getting more exhausted, just not being able to function or be as supportive to my clients and my patients as possible. So, you know, every so often I will find that even though I have reports to write or whatever, I say, you know what, I need to take some time. I'm going to take an hour and build something, or I'm just going to take the night off and paint something. Um, so that's really good for me in that sense. Interestingly enough, aside from just helping me focus and center, it actually helps my physical well-being, which in turn helps my mental, like my mental health. So when yeah, I'm kind of like a bear in the sense that when winter comes around, I just love eating carbs and donuts and pasta, and I just pack on weight. I just pack on weight, and the cons actually keep me in check because it gives me a goal to aspire to. So as much as I am about body acceptance and being true to yourself, it gives me a goal to say, you know what, I really want to get in better shape so I can fit in this Wolverine costume. I want to get in better shape so I can fit in this Azrael costume. So when I made that Azrael costume, I legit worked out I worked out like 3 times a week. I was doing clean eating, and I lost 30 pounds, just to fit into
Whoa.
that costume. Yeah, and what's really awesome about it is, so when I start building, typically I attend the Chicago Comic and Entertainment Expo, which is C2E2 here in Chicago. And it's typically around March, April. So depending on how many costumes I need to make for myself, my wife, and my friends, I'll start everything in January. January 1st is the time that I give myself. So I give myself 3 months to get everything ready for that convention. So I'll work out for 3 months, and then it comes to the culmination of that convention, and then I look forward to Wizard World Chicago, which is in August. So I get a little bit of time off, but then I know I got to still fit in that costume. So I go back to clean eating. I go back to working out. So it kind of helps me maintain my physical health, which in turn makes me mentally healthy. I feel better about myself. My self-esteem is great. I fit my clothes, and and this is where the challenge of 2020 has come in with the pandemic, where everything's canceled, and because of it, I just don't have any reason really to work out, because I don't like working out. I think it's painful, even though I should be. I don't like being in pain unless I have a real reason to, or just kind of superficially, I just want to fit in something cool. So there's that reason. It helps me physically stay healthy, which helps me mentally stay healthy. And being such an extrovert, I love hanging out with people. And when I create things, people want them. People say, hey, can you make me I'm trying to convince Josué one day to, instead of just making a Gundam figure, I said, hey, we can build one for you so you actually be that Gundam figure. Like, you can be that Gundam figure and create your own diorama in real life. And
this is the second time you've brought this up, Joe. I don't know what to say. Don't tempt me.
Yeah, so
like, you keep going up in higher scales, like when you do these model kits, right? It's like you start at like the smallest one, and then like they're like, no, you gotta try this one, and then like they keep getting more expensive and more and larger, and they sell ones that are like almost as big as you, but that I don't know what scale that would be if we make it. But yeah, I'm very excited.
But hey, it's a possibility, and I've seen. It would be a new one for me. I've created Transformer robots, but I've never created a Gundam before. So that would be a cool challenge. But yeah, that social component, just as much as important it is to create for me, it's important for me to hang out with people. And that's just me as a person. So having people come over and being able to talk and catch up and share meals with them during breaks and stuff like that, and just get dirty and get bruised up and figure out things together. That's the part that I love the most. And that's such an important component of being mentally healthy for me, is having like those social connections with people.
Yeah. Oh man. Like, that's there's like, the socializing part, I think, is just geek culture in general. I think that's it bothers me. I mean, there are people out there who like start talking about geeks as if like it's a diagnosis, which bothers me as one part that I hate. And something that I disagree with is the idea that geeks build community because they were either bullied or they're like social misfits. And I've always had a problem with it. It's like, oh yeah, we all go to Comic-Con because like we're not accepted anywhere else. I'm like, no, we go to Comic-Con because our people are there. You know, like it's a different mindset. It's a reframing, but I don't think that what unites us is any negativity that we've experienced because of our hobby. It's because it's that positivity. And man, I gotta tell you, I never put too much thought into the motivation aspect of like wanting to fit into your cosplay. Like when we talk about weddings, right? That's such a, like it's part of the deal, right? It's like, you know, one size lower, I'll get to that size, right? And then if you have to take out a dress, you know, or a suit, like that's not as hard as like rebuilding the armor rib cage on your Iron Man suit, right?
That's exactly what it was. And you know, in that picture with you as Azrael, you know, like my weight just fluctuates like crazy, and to fit in that suit comfortably, I need to weigh about, at most, I need to weigh about 185 pounds to fit in that suit. And when I'm in my quote unquote off season, I can just pack on weight and I'll get up to like 200 pounds, you know? So, you know, as you said, I wanted to wear that costume again. I got invited to one of the Mecca Comic Cons, which is the San Diego Comic Con. And I was like, I got to bring Azrael. I got to go and bring one of my best suits. And I was like, well, this means you got to fit in it again, dude. So I'm like, and so many people were saying like, well, why don't you just build a bigger suit? And I was like, do you know how long that took me to build that? And, you know, I was like,
I'll just hit extra, you know, one size up on the 3D printer.
Yeah.
And I'll be right back. Yeah.
Let me just do that. So it's not that simple. And for me, I'm like, well, not only is the suit already completed, it's probably better for me to actually work out than just being okay with being heavier. You know, I was like, it's probably going to be better for my mental health to actually get back into working out and have motivation, and it provides structure in my life where you're like, all right, you know, you got to work out on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's your structure now, and it just helps me stay regimented.
Mm-hmm. That is so cool. Yeah, I mean, motivation is a big part of the work we do. So I mean, anything, right, that can motivate you, depending especially like where you are mentally, emotionally, like just any small piece of motivation can be so helpful when you're feeling hopeless and completely like, you know, unmotivated and 100% just anything. And it's something we care about. These are things we're into. It's, that's really cool.
Absolutely.
Brandon, what about you? Like, how do you use your hobby for your own mental health or well-being?
It's just really to get me doing something. I have, I tend to be more introverted, and if I'm experiencing stress or, you know, feeling overwhelmed, I have a behavioral tendency to start to kind of shut down and do less. It's like, oh, I had a hard day at work. I'm just going to park on the couch and maybe just scroll on Facebook, and that's going to be it. And this isn't anti-social media or anti-scrolling, but what I know for myself is just scrolling on Facebook takes very little effort, and it does not do very much for my mood, right? And so, like I was kind of saying before, and the implications for how I can use this in clinical work, it's really just to get me to do some stuff. So like if I have D&D scheduled every week, that's an obligation that I'm not likely to just back out or ditch that, because I know there are people, generally speaking. What
was the last episode of GT Adventures? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
It's been a minute. Yeah.
Sorry.
Generally not able to, and so that's a good part of it. And also the same with the painting and the 3D printing. It kind of gets into like really just being able to get creative or have a problem to solve. Like, why is this print not working? Why can't I get this to go? I've got to tinker with something. Or maybe one of my favorite things is to print upgrades for my printer. And so that gets you into a pretty weird but fun loop where it's like I'm doing this work and then everything just works better and better the more I do. And so there's just a lot of really fun kind of behavioral loops that you can get stuck into. And I've bought the supplies, but I haven't taken the plunge. I want to expand out the miniatures into doing more like scenes or dioramas or things like that. And so I've bought some grass and stuff like that, or some gravel, to make, pathways or whatever. And so it's just thinking about, I bought grass. Yeah. I don't think I can't remember the technical name for it. I think it's called green stuff maybe. It's those kind of things. Really, it's just getting me to do stuff, because if I'm not feeling my best, I tend to do less, and then that's the opposite of what I need.
Yeah, I love that. With the models, I had a similar way of thinking about it, and the more I create them, I'm like, there's this sense of completion that you can get, right? And so, like, Joe, I'm curious how you complete like it takes a while to finish first of all, let's acknowledge, right? Once you get into art, your art is never finished, right? Like, you're always like, there's so much more I can do. But like, there's a moment where you're like, oh, I finished my costume, right? So I'm guessing that you set up moments or stages or milestones where you're like, that arm is done. Like, that boot is done, and it feels like you finished something. And in the model making, what I've done is, that happens too, but there's something about that completion of like, okay, the model is kind of done at different, like, okay, I built it. Maybe I haven't done all the other stuff, but just building it feels good. So I've bought, like I said before, they come at different scales and different difficulty levels. So I actually have some that can take about 10 minutes, and I have some that'll take about an hour or so. And Bandai, the company that makes the Gundam models, they started these things called 30-minute missions. And it's these kits that they're really cool. They're like compatible with each other. So like they can it's basically Lego to a certain extent. It's like you can mix and match them, but they're designed to be completed in 30 minutes. And you have a full like articulated robot. And so I have different things like that. So sometimes I'm like, I need a win. I want to feel like I finished something. And so I'll build a smaller, easier kit. And then I'm like, oh, okay, no, this is awesome. And like, I love all the different sizes. And so I'm actually kind of overwhelmed thinking about some of the more difficult ones. There's this grade in Gundams, it's called a perfect grade, which is like a 1/60th scale. And the smaller high grade ones are 1/144th. So like, these things are big and intricate. And there's this one kit that just came out that has like a full LED system throughout the like, it has like a LED skeleton so that a bunch of different parts can light up, and that would take a long time. And there's a lot of places for things to go wrong. And we're talking about electronics now. Like, I love that idea, but I have to have, like, I don't know, I need a certain mindset to be able to start and do something like that. But yeah, but the idea of doing something, accomplishing something, completing something, and even just practicing splitting that up right into those different stages can be so such a again, the idea is like, how can we be more mindful about this stuff, right? It's like, oh, like, yeah, instead of seeing it as it's overwhelming, I'm never gonna finish it, I'm a failure for not finishing it. It's like, oh man, I just finished that arm. It took me an hour, but it looks awesome. It's done. Actually, I love like having like just the legs of my models just like standing up on their own. I'm like, they're standing up on their own. I did something right. It feels good to like have the different pieces just lying around. So again, like also like a way of it's a way of practicing being more mindful about stuff and like a more positive mindset too.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And, I was just kind of thinking about, maybe I'm jumping the gun, but I'm thinking about the things that people tend to overlook when doing hobbies and such like that. And one of the things that I always preach about is being that, one of the things that I really preach about is the journey is just as important as the destination, and it's about these the little battles that happen, those are the things that you have to look at overall in terms of winning the war, so to speak. So, um, just being able to accomplish something that was really challenging, or you finally got those lights to work, or you finally got the legs to just stand up. I think for all of us who dabble in different mediums with building things, building figures or whatnot. It's just about it's breaking those components up into stages, and also being able to celebrate that, like, all right, I'm satisfied with this, I can move on to the next thing. And then once you have it, not only do you have multiple victories along the way, but you have a culmination of those victories that you can really celebrate, so um, I think that's just something that's just really something to pay attention to. I know for me, I personally also work in stages when I'm building something. So I've come to learn over the years that I need to build. This is where that organization and that executive functioning issue comes in, where you're like, what piece do I need to complete first in order to make things proportional and to scale? Because if you make something first, are you going to keep it in proportion to what else is going on? So, for example, some of the later things that I build are like hands, and people are like, well, why do you do that? Because let's say you build your hands first, and then you start making your head, and then you start making your body. If you create standard hands or standard gloves that your typical hands can fit in, but then you realize that your head is just a little bit too big, or your chest piece is a little bit too big, then you have baby hands. You have baby hands on an adult body. Or just realizing, so the other things that I create last are, I create the thigh pieces. And people wonder, why do I create that? Because I'm like, because you need to create the feet first, which will help determine your scale, because it raises you. It'll make you taller. And you're like, well, now that I'm this tall, it means that my shins are this long. And now that my shins are this long, what is the space between my kneecaps to my waistline? How much space do I have there to work with? So it's all about trying to determine which thing you have to complete first. And that's why I'm saying, like, the things that get overlooked is those small victories. You have to pay attention to each stage and being able to find enjoyment, because if you don't, that's like saying, like, oh, I really want to lose weight. I want to lose 30 pounds, and that's you never being satisfied, or never celebrating, or never giving yourself a pat on the back for losing those 10 pounds or those 20 pounds. That's a lot of weight. And you're telling me that you're not going to be praising yourself along the way until you hit that dead on 30? That's going to be a really difficult journey.
Yeah. I think you're definitely already feeding into the next question I wanted to ask, which is, what is something about these hobbies that people could do more mindfully and benefit from, that are usually overlooked? Like we overlooked, and you even use that word, right? Like people overlook this part of the executive functioning. Like one thing that I learned is, like, these hobbies get more and more expensive the deeper you get into them, right? So like one thing that I want, like I have a painting booth behind me, and really that's for like exhaust of the paint fumes and things like that. So it's safer. Like I have a respirator, like I have like all this safety stuff. I just got like prescription safety goggles. It gets more expensive the deeper you get into it. But ideally, like what I'm moving towards is getting an airbrush, because then it's different. Like I love the idea of hand painting, but there's other things you can do, especially for broader areas, with an airbrush. And one thing I've learned is, like, people will build the entire model first and then start taking it apart, thinking about, well, how am I going to paint this? Because of a lot of the things that you just said, right? Like you could just build it and then like not do things in the correct order, and you're going to end up paying for it later. So it's like, oh, there are things that I can fix and glue and do this way, and then paint this whole part and it'll be easier. And like that takes a lot of planning and work and thinking, and it's like taking something down into its parts, right? But not just the individual parts. It's like now you're grouping them, and you can think about how to make your life easier moving forward, and just how to do it better, so like you can even get better quality. And there are right and wrong ways to do these things depending on the outcomes that you want. So yeah, I think that's something that surprised me about the hobby, and it's something that I'm sure a lot of people don't pay attention to, and it's something that's really hard for me as someone who struggles a lot with ADHD. Like when I'm building, I actually try to. I've seen people who just cut all the pieces out and then just start building. Like, and I can't do that. I need to go in order on the instructions, and do this way, because if not, I'll get overwhelmed and I'll get lost. And that's like a reflection on understanding how my brain functions and how I can have a better experience and still achieve the outcome that I want. But this part about the painting and stuff, it's like, oh, wait a minute. There's an order of operations that I need to follow to actually achieve the outcome that I want.
Right. Yeah, very much so. And if you don't do it, I mean, you might not get the results you're looking for.
Yeah. So I'll ask it again. Like, what is something about our hobby that people could do more mindfully and benefit from that is often overlooked? Brandon, any thoughts?
Well, for me, the one part is, I think, speaking to developing the skill for painting miniatures a bit, because I think that it's easy to look online and maybe see people who play Warhammer and have painted 2,000 miniatures. And, these things are just unbelievable to look at. You would never expect that a person painted it. So I think that just remembering that there are certain probably developmental stages for doing that kind of painting, and going through that process and just kind of getting comfortable with the perfectionism part if you struggle with that, and not just throwing the towel in if it's not, exactly how you'd like it to be right away. I know there are a lot of really good communities online that help with that part. There's a Facebook group that I belong to. I think it's called Miniature Painting Noobs. And it's just one of the most wholesome, positive communities that you could ever hope to find on the internet. I think it really speaks to that point, that it's really easy to get discouraged. And, you can see some pretty, and I say this as someone who's very much, I would say, developing the skills yet. And you can see some people who post stuff like that on there where it's, obviously still developing the skill, which is okay. And it's just really positive, while still giving feedback and like, here's something you could try for next time, but wow, that looks really good. And so I think that's probably one thing for that hobby that is just an important reminder, probably.
Yeah. For me, one thing I love learning. Just like, that's something that I know about me. The act of learning how to do these things is, I've spent more time learning than building. That's often not a good thing. That sometimes you just get into like reading every single book on a thing and you don't actually do the thing. In different areas of your life, that can be a problem. But I do enjoy the act of learning and then practicing. But something about painting miniatures in particular that I've learned a lot from, or that I've enjoyed, is just watching other people do it. It's just relaxing. Like until you actually do it and start practicing, like, you're not retaining that actual skill, right? Like you're not getting more skilled by watching. You're learning technique and stuff, but like you have to do it to learn. But I just love watching, like just hearing people talk about it. And like, this is why I'm doing something. It's just been so therapeutic, and like, it's a part of the hobby too, right? Like, I haven't painted a single miniature yet, but I want to. But I've watched hours of other people doing it, and it's just relaxing. I love it. And I love watching 3D print.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
It's so soothing. I know. It's
like watching videos of, especially, like, it's just fascinating to watch a sped up, sped up, CNC doing cutting, or a 3D printer going through. But just, if you actually have a 3D printer, like, that thing is just like, and it's like, you're like, wow, we're living in the future. This is amazing. It's just so cool. Like, it's kind of like a zoning out meditation kind of thing, like a point of focus. There's some, I don't know. That's like, if you've got a 3D printer and you're not watching your prints sometimes, or watching them later, or watching some online, I think you're missing out on this really relaxing and really cool piece of the building process.
Absolutely. I think of it like how people like to sit and enjoy a campfire. For me, watching my 3D printer is like it's the same level of like peace and calm. It's like, this is just so nice.
Yeah. Very different noise than your Dremel going off and like smoking up a room, Joe. It's just like, it's like
different. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's anything, I don't know yet how to do molding and casting, but that in itself might be something similar where you can actually sit back and enjoy the process of watching those chemicals cure and whatnot. But outside of that, I don't really think that that's one of the aspects of the cosplay part that I'm not accustomed to, where you can get to just sit back and enjoy. It's not really exciting watching hot glue cool or watching contact cement get sticky. It's not as satisfying.
But it is like, I also enjoy like watching people sew and watching people like just all crafts. Like there's something about like the flow of it and seeing it go. I don't know. It's like it's a part that I think people don't think about, and you can still enjoy.
I think that watching people in their element and having a sense of, for lack of a better word, flow. Like being in the zone, so to speak, and just like watching them. It's a different experience. Like it's just so fluid and so natural that it's just something you'd have to see to experience. Yeah. I was actually reflecting on one more thing that maybe we kind of touched on, but I do think that it needs to be reiterated in terms of something that gets overlooked in helping you do things more mindfully. It is that for all of us and for whatever medium you choose to use, just paying attention to the equipment you're using is such, it can make your life substantially easier and that much more enjoyable.
Oh, you mean like the maintenance and upkeep of your tools? Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That is such a good point. That is so good.
Right. So I mean, like, as I was saying before, like we can use some dollar store craft scissors to cut this out, but it's going to be harder. Your lines are going to be more jacked up. You're going to have to do more work to get it smoother. But should you choose to invest in a better tool, like some really sharp, brand new out of the box razor blades, or you get a better quality heat gun, or for Brandon, you get a better quality 3D printer. It makes your hobby that much more enjoyable because you are seeing a direct correlation of your energy and your time in regards to your product. You're like, I have invested this, and it might be pricey out the door, but it's made a world of difference in terms of the product that I want to put out. And I've seen that firsthand where, just upping my game with like, it's gonna be kind of pricey, but this sander is gonna make my life substantially easier. Getting a what was it called? Just thinking about that sander. Like before I was just using plain old sandpaper, and I was like, oh man, this is taking forever, and my hands hurt. Like I'm not getting the kind of quality that I want. And then I invested in a Dremel, and I was like, oh, this is making my life so much easier. This is awesome. And then I started realizing that there were still limitations with using a Dremel. And then I'm like, just go for it. Just buy this sanding belt. Just buy this giant sanding belt, and it's going to cost like $300 or whatever. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm buying a $300 tool when I have 20 other tools that I need to purchase. This is just for one thing. But it pays for itself, and the quality of your work is that much better. And then when people can see that and they acknowledge the quality of your work, I think that speaks to you enjoying doing your work that much more.
Yeah. I'll say that it's not always possible, right? Like some of these tools are super expensive. Like right now, I'm in the middle of that thing where I'm like, I could buy an $80 airbrush, but I should probably buy a $300 one so that I don't throw it out the window, right? After the first time for messing up my kit. But that's not always possible. Like in Brandon's case, like you have a 3D printer, buying a better 3D printer is hundreds of dollars, right? So it's not always possible. But I love this idea of the upkeep and the maintenance of it, right? Or even just learning how to use it properly, right? Like on a 3D printer, you need to clean your nozzles. You need different sizes. You need to think about your material. You need to think about the heat, the heat level on the base. Like there's all these different things that you can do, and you can maintain it. It's got to be level. If that thing is not level, right? If that base is not level, your prints are coming out all jacked up, and it can be frustrating. But understanding your tool, cleaning it, maintaining it properly, just this goes for any tools, including your brain, right? This is really good, and yeah, like even something simple like you said, like razor blades, right? Like I have extra. Like at some point, I'm just unnecessarily going through a headache because I haven't just like. New kit, new razor blade. That's it. Like they're like $1. Like just do it. It'll make your life easier. Sandpaper. The more you use the sandpaper, that grit is changing. It doesn't work like it used to because it's not the same grit anymore. Like just switch to a different piece. Buy a new piece of sandpaper.
or just use the tool that is going to do the job. You know, like so if you're using sandpaper and you're like, this is going to be a really fine detail. Why are you like, you're not going to get the kind of results by using the wrong kind of sandpaper.
Right.
Simple as that, you know? So I know for me, I make it a point every single time for myself to, every time I start a new quote unquote season, I call it, I'm like, it's cosplay season, everyone. You know what time it is. I get a brand new pack of razor blades out. I buy, brand new glue. I buy all these things because I want things to be, I want to know that if there is an error, it's probably not because of the materials, because the materials are new versus like, well, is this old or is it this fault? You know, so like, it's just one less thing I have to factor in. The other thing that I factor in too is whenever I am working on something new, especially the next day, I always clean my workspace. I really find that is so helpful for me because I don't know about you guys, but in terms of your medium that you use, but for me, if I start something new, let's say a new portion or a new aspect of my thing that I'm trying to create, but I have remnants or debris of older things, it throws me off. It's like, it's there's like some satisfaction to like getting into a newly made bed, or there's a satisfaction of just being able to like have a clean blank canvas versus like, well, I'm starting something new, but I'm kind of stuck with all this old stuff that's kind of clogging my vision, so to speak.
Yeah, like I mean, you can probably see behind me that I've got like organizers for my paints and stuff. Like I didn't have that a couple weeks ago, and it was annoying. Now I've got like, okay, now I have more space to work with. Now everything's more organized. I know where things are. It also like it makes me want to work more too. I think there's a lot of aspects to that. I know, Brendan, you just started like you just organize your workspace too, right? Like you've got a dedicated space for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I actually just moved. And so before I was just using like this computer desk that I'm working at as my desk and my crafting space. And so it's actually been pretty cool. The house that I moved into had in the basement like a workspace and a bench and stuff. And so I was able to set up all of my 3D printing stuff and all of my painting stuff there. And so it's I think such a benefit to have a dedicated space too, where I can just have everything available. Because before I had to kind of get everything out if I wanted to start. And even that, when, you're dealing with barriers to engaging in these pleasant or positive activities, that was certainly one. And now I can just sit down and start. And I think that's just huge.
Yeah. I don't, I know it's not possible always, but when I got this apartment also, it's taken me years to get to a point where I could have an extra room. But I use this room, like the desk that I'm on this is my work area. This is my recording area. This is where I podcast. This is where I record videos. And then behind me is my workbench, right? That's where I build. That's where I do crafts. That's where I do all these things. And all of this is contained in this room. And it doesn't spill over into my other living areas, right? So like, there's something about that I wanted and I was able to achieve, that I think is super important. And there's a lot of parallels and lessons to that we could use to help clients, with a lot of those insights. Yeah, definitely parts of the hobby that I think are definitely like beneficial to focus on if we just were more mindful about them and definitely overlook them.
I mean. There's also something like you can use. So this is why I love the concept of using art and creation in terms of working with clients, because that metaphor in itself of, having just a clean space and a blank slate to what you're doing can do wonders. So for example, you can relate that to client issues of like, let's say for example,
boundaries.
Yeah,
right?
like boundaries. Or even clients who are like getting into I'm dating a new person. Well, that's cool and all, but have you cleaned up all the residual stuff so that you're not carrying it in or contaminating the new relationship? You're like, my last significant other cheated on me, but whatever. Well, when did that happen? Like 2 weeks ago, but it's all good. I'm dating a new person. Okay. And that's completely your choice, but have you processed that stuff so that that's not going to influence or impact your new relationship? Because we want you to go in this with a clean slate so you can actually give it a 100% honest, genuine chance versus like, well, I really like this person, but now I got trust issues, but I'm going to force it. I'm going to force it to happen. You're like, I don't know how well this is going to go for you, but hey, I'm on this journey with you. I'm on this journey. So.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, Brandon, on this idea of like parts that we maybe mindfully?
I don't think so. No,
Yeah.
Nothing else that's coming to mind right away.
Yeah. We spent so much time on this question. I love it.
It was a good one.
Flexibility. So I have one more question for each of you. Okay. This is hopefully you'll find it fun, which is pie in the sky. Magic star, wishing, the whole thing, genie, whatever, ideal clinical practice space. Anything goes. You can design it however you want, based on like who you are, what these hobbies are. What does that look like? Brandon, what does this space look like for you?
It would, my mind goes in a few different directions. I know that we have, and a lot of people have talked about Dungeons and Dragons as a social skills development vehicle. And so certainly having some kind of space that's available for playing some kind of tabletop game like that would be necessary. Certainly I think having some kind of almost like kind of like Joe was talking about, a lot of this stuff you don't want to do in a typical therapist office. But if you could have a workshop therapist office, boy, would that be nice. Where you wouldn't have to worry about starting a fire or, or getting into the news for a not good reason. So I think, just having the space and the materials available there, where you could do this stuff in that moment, or at least start it. I just think that would be really cool.
Yeah. Well, if you think of, as we go through ours, if you think of more like, more fantastical, like just crazy.
Right. That was pretty down to earth.
It was pretty like, I was like, I think you could do that. I think
a conference room.
Happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I wish I had a conference room, man. Yeah. So I'm going to give you another chance. Joe, what would you do?
I'm like, I'm going off on my fantasies, which is a dangerous thing for me. But, gosh, if I had the space, I would love a warehouse. I would love like an abandoned warehouse that needs to be renovated, and one just like, I would have I've seen this. I've actually seen these kinds of things in, um, what do they call them?
Like
In
movie lots and things like this.
no, no, like they're for more like rehab places and
Mm.
more, like we had one when I was part of a community mental health organization. There was one that had residents. Like it was partnered with residents, and they had just like this giant facility that had different rooms designated to teaching skills like vocational skills or whatever skills, and um, it was literally made like a warehouse that they transformed and like, oh, this is the area where we're gonna teach more like um, you know cooking skills, and this is the area we're going to teach uh, you know building skills or crafting skills or whatever, things that maybe you could turn into an occupation or something like that. If I had that kind of room and the assistance with that, like that would be amazing. I would probably need um, some people that I could trust, in terms of
You need the staff. Like
I
you
need staff. Yeah, I would need staff, and it's kind of funny because when people, when I'm doing a costume season, cosplay season, I kind of have in mind in my friend group, um, who are I designate them in my mind. I'm like, this person's a builder, and this person is not a builder. So the builders, I actually give a lot of leeway where they don't need a lot of direction. They know how to use the tools. They have their own creative ideas. Where that's awesome, Um, then there are other people who don't have that skill set, but there's always something to do, where I'm like, well, hey, can you be my gopher? Where like we need more razor blades or we need more glue or, can you paint this? Because those don't necessarily involve as much of a skill set as a creative builder does. So I would need staff. And then just having the tools there, the space would have maybe separate stations or tables. I would love, I think about like the iconic Bat Cave, where it has like those glass costume tubes that showcase each one, and I like have this like idea in my mind of like not only like a stage, but like each one has its own. They're like cubby holes for each costume, so you'd have like mannequins with each kind of like cubby hole along the walls, like a Iron Man kind of thing, where you're like, oh, I walk in, you see various sizes, and you're like, you get to pick which suit you want based on the need that you have. You're like, oh, I got this thing coming up, I'm gonna go with that suit over there, or or I'm going to make adjustments to it. There's the soldering station over there. There's I've linked with other artists. I'm going to call Brandon over, who's specializes in 3D printing, and I was like, hey Brandon, can you hook me up with I need some 3D printed things for whatever, just so like it would be a whole agency and a whole collaboration with like-minded people who have an awesome skill set, and then to bring clients or patients into that setting, to be like, well, this is what you want to work on. Let's do it together. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. I mentioned the movie lot because I was thinking of like just all the costumes, right? All the pieces that you could have. And like when you said earlier, it's like, imagine, well, what if you were Deadpool? But then like let's try it on for size, right? And like you have a mask or you have like a suit that's like more simple, and you could put it on and do something like that, and just make it happen, immediately. It's like, oh, I want to try it on. Like Sophia Ansari, she's a host on a podcast on the Geek Therapy Network called Hero Nation. Like she changes her headscarf depending on like different supers, and she has a Deadpool one, and she loves to wear her Kamala Khan Ms. Marvel t-shirt, and like that's as far as most of us go, right? Usually. But if I were your client and you were like, Deadpool? I got Deadpool. What kind of Deadpool do you want? Like, just put it on for a second, right? And it's like, man, like how does that feel? What would you do if you were Deadpool? Like taking that idea to the next level, Crazy.
That would be awesome. And then I start thinking about like, gosh, if there was like a photo shoot area to be like, not only can you wear this costume, let's get you some really amazing photography. I'm going to call in one of my friends who's an amazing photographer. We got a cool backdrop. What backdrop, what setting would you like? What are the props? Do you want a bazooka or you want a katana or you want a rubber chicken? Like what do you want in your hands to like kick some butt? Do you need extra props? Because that once again aids to the creativity, aids to the fantasy of being able to do something that you would be typically unable to do, you know? And then after that to be like, hey man, this is your time. Here's your photos. And, you know, this is something that you can remember as a keepsake for the qualities, not necessarily the character you wish to become, but more so the qualities of that character that you aspire to have.
Yeah. When I was, there was a while when I worked at a mental health clinic, and I had a team. So I was like assigned a family, and I could say like, all right, one of my team members is like, all right, you work with the siblings on social skills and you go help mom and dad with parenting skills while I go and I do the therapy over here and work with them. And like having people to deploy, and like your treatment plan includes all of these different things, right? Like the photo shoot and, you know, the costume making. It's like you don't have to be hands-on with all of it. You can have all of those pieces. It sounds like you've thought about this a lot. Joe.
Yeah, I have, just because that's the dream, and my wife is really adamant about getting me a workshop, because I currently, when it's cosplay season, my workshop is our living room, and you know,
that doesn't sound healthy for your relationship.
No, I mean, like I was like, which is you know, like I set up tables like behind our sofa, and which is right next to our dining table, and which is in between our bedrooms, so there are just like spotlights so I can see. There's debris on the floor. You know, I'm constantly dragging things in with me, whether it's dirt or dust, or like I smell like fumes or something like that. But yeah, that was typically what I was doing. And now it's fortunate, because in speaking with my landlord, I was like, hey, you know, I do a lot of this stuff. Is there any way that you can help me out? And in an amazing, you know, turn of events, he gave me access to our one of the laundry rooms. It's a huge facility laundry room that no one uses, and there's nothing in there. And I found out, like, I cleaned it up, I vacuum shopped the whole thing, I found an outlet, I put some spotlights in there, so that is now my workshop, and it's right behind my apartment, which I can just literally walk out the door, go in there, no one else has access to it. So that's amazing. So I just hope that, well, rather we are hoping that as when eventually we get a house, that's kind of like one of the things that we're looking for. Since art is such a big factor in my life, we need a designated art space so that not only can I continue to produce the products that I want to do, but I'm also married at the end of it. You know, I'm still married at the end of it.
That is the dream. All right, Brandon, like I was imagining like Joe Manganiello's basement. Like, have you seen that on YouTube? Yes. Will Wheaton's living room, or right. I don't know if it's his real living room or the set of tabletop, right? At the very least, awesome. It's like something like that. So let's see. Anything you would add?
That is what was in my mind when I was describing the space. It was something more like that. I'll admit that, and admit I didn't maybe articulate it very well, and more so just to describe a conference room. But I was imagining something more fantasy themed. At this point, though, I just want to work. I just want to work with Joe, though.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be his staff.
Why would I start something of my own? I just want to be there with my 3D printer, just making batarangs, whatever.
Batarangs, making props.
Yeah, for sure.
Why reinvent the wheel? Like, Brandon has this down. I'm not going to be like, I know what I'm doing. I don't need anybody. I'm going to be like, hey, Brandon, I need you to do your magic. Come on over, man. Like, you tell me what equipment you need. Hopefully I got enough finances, and there's your station. But that's a dream. I've always had a dream of collaborating with like-minded artists, or just like creating an art space. I was really serious at one point in time of like, I started doing a lot of research and looking into the cost of having an actual workspace. and what it would be like to actually feasibly financially pay for one between several artists who specialized in certain things. Because I'm like, I know what I can do, I know what I can't do, or don't know how to do at this time. So to be like, hey, would you be willing to share a workspace with me if we can kind of trade skills and learn from each other and just have, once again, that social aspect of a creative environment? Because when I'm around creative people, I become more creative. If not, I'm just a lazy whatever. And I was like, I have no reason being here, you know. So I'll just go home, you know. So
yeah. No, this is something I think about all the time too, and it would be like a cross between a makerspace or a fab lab or things like that, where like we can actually make things, a reality, and then an arcade, right? Like it's like it's a combination of those two things. There's this place in Virginia called the Torpedo Factory, where like they took a literal torpedo factory and they remade it as an art space. So like different artists, each artist has a different room. So it's like it's something I was thinking about, and yeah, like I can just imagine, right? I'm giving you a hard time, Brendan, but I know I can imagine what those spaces would look like if we, if like we just could, if we can make them happen. Most people don't have even like the conference room right, to do some of this stuff. So yeah, man, this has been a really fun conversation. I hope those of you who are at Save Against Fear 2020 find value out of this. Those of you listening to this on the GT Radio feed find some value in some of these things. I think, Joe, you've passed the test. I'm willing to have a podcast with you. Now we can definitely make stuff happen, and long term we'll work our way up to this warehouse idea. Yeah, long term, I'm very serious. Yeah. One of these days, it's gonna happen. You know, you dream it, you think it, you do it. So. I definitely want to do that, and when I do, I definitely want to collaborate with like-minded people. So you'll be definitely hearing from me, and who knows? Like my love is to create really cool things and expand my skill sets. So as I said, I've never made a Gundam suit before. I'm down for it. Brandon, if you want to bring your D&D characters to life, I'm cool with making goblins and ghouls and wizards and. You know, there's a bunch of stuff that I just haven't even broken into, just because I either don't have the time or I don't have the skill set yet. But I'm about finding and collaborating people who do. We're gonna put you to work, Joe. Don't you worry about it. We're gonna put you to work. So thank you everyone for checking out this video or audio. Again, I hope it's super helpful. For more conversations like these, go to geektherapy.com, where we have many different podcasts focused on different topics, and hopefully a new one soon. I love the idea of dream it, think it, build it. I mean, the three of us, that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Like I wasn't always this way. I didn't know how to make stuff, right? Or even bring things to life. But there's something about art that allows us to do that. And I think, this is one of the geekiest conversations I've ever had on any Geek Therapy platform. Like we went deep into mental health and all of this stuff. So I will put contact information for everyone on this podcast and this video in the show notes or the video notes. So yeah, visit geektherapy.com for more information. Thank you so much for joining us. Geek Therapy would like to say, remember to geek out and do good. That's what we're all about here. So thank you again, and goodbye.